Let's meet our panelists. If you guys wouldn't mind quickly introducing yourself and your company, your project, and briefly describe your involvement with the HIC.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mackenzie Andrews, and I am the co-founder and chief commercialization officer of Nanodropper. We have designed an adapter for eye drop bottles that actually reduces the drop size. So currently, eye drops are too big, which creates a lot of medical waste and increases the cost for patients. And so we've basically been working to solve the issue of medical waste and financial barriers to care in the ophthalmic space. Our team presented Nanodropper at the HIC back in 2018 and 2019. So we actually did it 2 years in a row. During 2018, we had really just started our project. We were super new. And we got kind of one of the runner-up prizes at the HIC, which is great kind of validation for our early project. And then a year later, after a year of research and development and prototyping, customer discovery, we re-entered and we actually came out with the grand prize that year, which was awesome. So
my name's Harrison. I was part of team ElectroSolar Oxygen. I competed in the HIC in 2019 and 2020. We were a team of chemical engineers, and essentially what we tried to do was create a portable oxygen concentrator for underserved medical facilities that could produce medical grade oxygen using just sunlight, water, and air. And initially, one of our main goals for joining the competition was to get some initial funding to get our project going.
So I'm Nikolas. I'm co-founder and CTO at Spira. We really joined HIC to get some experience pitching, getting our product in front of people. And really what Spira is we built a platform that enables physicians to build custom virtual assistants for telehealth or for their private practices with a focus on respiratory diseases.
Now that we know a little bit more about you guys specifically, I'd also like to hear you talk a little bit more about your team. So sort of who was on your team, how did you guys find each other? If you needed to recruit team members, how did you go about that?
Our original co-founding team and the kind of team that came together to enter the HIC consisted of myself. My background was in bioengineering and also neuroscience. And then our now CEO, her background, she got her bachelor's degrees in biology and psychology from the University of Washington. Our chief scientific officer was getting her PhD in pharmacology from the University of Washington. She recently graduated. So what was really critical for us is each year that we entered, we actually recruited an MBA student to our team to help us flesh out some of our kind of gaps in business knowledge. So we actually each time found an MBA student directly through the networking nights. So that was really helpful to us. We went and talked about our idea and said that we are looking for somebody with business experience. And we got some awesome students to join in on our team, help us with like our marketing strategy, financial development, stuff like that. Just stuff that we didn't have the background to do.
I guess when I first joined the HIC, that was the first competition we entered. I was in a team with 3 other undergraduate chemical engineering majors. And for the fall, I think in total, we participated in 5 competitions. In the next 2, we actually recruited a help of an MBA, similar to what Mackenzie did. But we found him through actually cold messaging. I ended up just go through LinkedIn and just messaging the ones who I felt would be interested in a project like this. And so I thought that, again, very helpful to help out flesh out our business plan and a more business-oriented aspect of the project.
Really, our founding team is myself, CTO, and my co-founder, Sage Kanuja, CEO. We're both, I guess we kind of met in an odd way. We're both early entrance students at UW. So we started at UW at 16. We started working on Spira before we even met in person. So we met as freshmen at UW. And we started working on Spira, joined HIC. We didn't find a need to recruit people, given that we're both CS majors and minoring in entrepreneurship. And so we also have the key here is that we have a really, really strong board of mentors that have really just helped us on the business side, especially on the health side. And so that's really covered that side for us.
So now that we know about your team and we know a little bit about your idea, I'm hoping that you can tell us about your experience working on your project within the competition and not within the or after or before the competition. Is there any, really high points or really low points that stand out to you?
Our team really came together and started working on the project in January of 2018. So that was literally 2 months before the actual competition. And so we tapped into as many student resources as we could. So we applied for the Buerk Center prototype funding both years, and we were able to receive that funding to actually start prototyping our physical product. But beyond that, we pulled the student card as often as we could. So there's office hours that you can get through, or mentoring meetings through a lot of different departments at UW. Usually get some sort of free consulting through the law school, or through a bunch of, or biostats department, stuff like that, where that's just free resources for students. So we tapped into a lot of those to try to learn about regulatory pathways and patents, and all of those things you need to be thinking about if you're going to be going into the medical space. We also just furiously networked, and so again, we pulled the student card. We would reach out to local ophthalmologists, so professionals in whatever medical industry you're trying to go into, and say hey, we're students working on this project, would you mind helping us out? Could we interview you? And a lot of professionals are really receptive to helping students. That was really critical to us, and honestly, we still do that today, even though we only have one student left on our team who's actually a medical student. We pull the student card as much as we can. We'll say, hey, we came out of the University of Washington, we started as a student team, and it keeps working. So highs and lows, honestly, I think the competitions were seriously some of the high points of our company and our journey. They're just so fun. You learn so much from the experience. And then again, the networking opportunities directly from the competitions. It's just I don't know, it's unmatched by anything else that we have done as a team. And it's cool because your team gets to, do it together, which doesn't always happen once you're actually in the real business world. So
I completely agree with Mackenzie. I think it's definitely very demanding, but at the same time, ultimately very rewarding. From a technical standpoint, I think it was really quite an endeavor to make sure that not only the science works behind something, but also making sure that it all fits together and it actually runs, in terms of your prototype. From the business standpoint, I thought it was very nice and very exciting to learn about all the aspects of actually pitching for a project or for a startup. And one thing that surprised me in that aspect was how supportive the Seattle startup community was. I think that's similar to what Mackenzie experienced, but sort of people who you reached out to were really quite willing to help out, even if whatever stage you were at, and however different you may think the stages of your projects are. And so I thought that was really, really encouraging. One of the mentors I met actually who helped me out throughout all the competitions was Randolph Lopez. He was the CTO, is the CTO of Alpha Bio, and he won the Dempsey Startup Competition, I think in 2018. And so I just, again, reached out to him on LinkedIn, and we just ended up chatting and met up over lunch a couple of times, of course, before COVID, and really helped me out through, even checked my pitch deck for the competitions and things like that. So really, really helpful people. And also that seemed to be consistent with my experience in the competitions as well. Even if they're judges, they're still, at the end of the day, still there willing to help you out with whatever project you are. So I think that was really, really such a big high for our team.
I guess to start with some highs and lows, we actually, Hollomon wasn't our first competition. We applied to another competition outside of UW. It's called Young Innovators to Watch, and we ended up winning that. And we were flown to Las Vegas to CES. I'm not sure if you guys heard of the Consumer Electronics Show. And so that was a really cool experience. That was definitely one of the highs, being able to go to CES and network and see all these really cool digital health applications. Obviously, after that, we competed in HIC, which was a great experience. Regardless of if whether or not we had won or not, I think it would still definitely be a huge high. After that, we also competed at Dempsey the next month, the Dempsey Startup Competition, where we placed 4th and won another side prize there. So that was another high. But obviously, with that, there's been some lows. And the main low I think so far has just been, it's a lot of work. Like we still put in, we put in like 10, 12 hours every day into Spira. And health is slow. It's not like fintech or any other areas where you can start a startup and after 3 to 6 months, it's like huge. And so and obviously like that's kind of more of the background that we came from. So coming into health, it's just different. Yeah, we had to like realign our expectations a little bit, if that makes sense. And then obviously talking about mentors, HIC was super valuable to gain some really high quality mentors. Like there's tons that we still talk to today that we've talked to in the last week, 2 weeks.
Now that we've talked a little bit about sort of your experience outside of the competition, if you would expand more on sort of the process that you went through in the HIC or, in the Dempsey or any of the competitions really. So things like, how did you manage your time, while being a student and also participating in the competition? Like Nikolas said, it takes a lot of time out of your day. How did you hone your pitch? What was doing that pitch like, especially to these sort of industry professionals? And then, aside from prizes, what do you feel like you got out of the competition?
So obviously we got our team together, and then you have like the first step is that like 5 to 7 page like business summary that you have to submit as the application. And we already had kind of identified our what each individual is bringing to the team, so kind of our strengths and weaknesses. And we just took like the sections or the things you're supposed to address in a like business summary and just divided it up between the people. So we like kind of divided up the sections and we set our own internal deadlines. So we knew that we wanted to probably go through like 2 to 3 rounds of edits and feedback. And so we set internal deadlines to have, each person's section done. And then we would review it and edit it as a team. And like we just went through like just cyclical revision process like that until we came to a like final document that we are really happy with and excited to submit. It kept everybody accountable for their own work, and nobody felt like they're like tackling a full like 7-page document on their own. And then kind of in parallel to that, we started prototyping. It was definitely like a couple months of time where my evenings were completely spent on Nanodropper, and that's just the reality when you're trying to do a venture along with being a student. You're sacrificing some of your free time. That was kind of our process. And then once we got accepted, then it was all about actually preparing for the competition itself. So for the pitch portion, that 1-minute pitch, we actually did a fun kind of like internal team competition. There were 3 of us that were actually interested in doing the 1-minute pitch. And so we all separately wrote our own 1-minute pitch. And then we we did a mini like internal pitch competition, and we filmed each person delivering their pitch and then sent it out to like our close network of like people that we trusted and had them vote on whose pitch they found like the most powerful, the most impactful. And we actually ultimately ended up drawing different pieces from each of the 3 people's pitches that they developed, put them all into one pitch, and then chose the person that had kind of the best audience feedback. So I think that was a really cool like collaborative and fair way to develop a really strong pitch. And then of course we had like the actual in-person booth at the time, and so a lot of time was spent like actually creating our materials, thinking about what our booth would look like. But I think that you can go through the same process with a virtual platform. Like, what materials do you want to have handy? So if somebody asks a certain question, maybe you can do a quick screen share or actually have a physical thing that you can hold up. And so thinking about like what types of questions might come up and what would be helpful to aid in answering those questions. And then like a couple nights before the actual competition itself, we went through like a whole team like Q&A crash course. So we like wrote out every question we could think of that could possibly be asked by judges, and like made sure that all of our answers, like we were on the same page with all of our answers. We were addressing the major points with our answers, and we just like would rapid fire like pick a random question off the list and choose somebody to answer it so that we all like had answers to the important questions. And I think that really helped us like on competition day.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the stuff Mackenzie said was very, very similar to what we experienced as a team in terms of building the business plan, in terms of building the prototype itself, using the makerspace, and also in terms of refining the pitch using the rapid fire method of testing each other. I thought that was almost exactly what we did. I think, how did we hone our pitch? I think one of the important things that we try to keep in mind as a team was knowing who the audience was and what their kind of intent is. And I think HIC and EIC are kind of similar in the sense that they're more, I think in my experience, more technical oriented. They care more about the technology and how it works. While in the Dempsey Startup Competition, I know that we're not talking about that now, but for them, it's more like, okay, your idea, I get it. How can we capture value that you're going to generate and how can we make money from it? So it's a different kind of goal and different kind of way you have to pitch your idea. And I thought that was kind of very, that was something that we learned as a team when going through all those 3 competitions. In terms of the pitch itself, again, I want to reiterate what Mackenzie said about writing out all those questions and testing each other. I think that really is the best way to really bulletproof your team to any kind of question that you get. And I think I just want to stress again the importance of making sure that everyone knows what everything in that document says. So I think you don't want to run into a situation where there's a judge or someone asks an individual and then he goes, oh, I'm not working on that. And you can talk to Harrison, he's the one working on the technical stuff. And I think that just makes your team look a bit incoherent.
Yeah, I think both of you guys kind of hit the nail on the head for what we did as well. To provide some more specifics, the way that Sage and I kind of divide things up is I'm usually focused on product and he's usually focused on business. And so that's kind of to this day, that's how we do it. And back then, that's how we structured things in terms of deliverables, in terms of pitch. He ended up doing the 1-minute pitch. I think that's he to be honest, he's a little bit stronger at public speaking than I am. So that was the only contributing factor to that decision. To respond to questions, we also went through a similar process where we literally just came up with all the questions that we could possibly ask each other, and we just grilled each other completely, which ended up paying off because I remember one of the judges just went complete rapid fire on us, like you see in the movies, like question after question, and there's like no hesitation. And so all of that kind of paid off. One thing I'll add is it was pretty tough actually managing our time back then. I mean, we were both freshmen. We were still figuring out like how to navigate UW. I guess ultimately what helped us a lot was just understanding kind of actually just divvying up that product and business helped us a lot. And we both knew our strengths really well. We knew what we had to do. And then one last point I'll just add to extend what Harrison was saying. We spent a lot of time thinking about how we should explain our product depending on the background of who we're talking to. And so there's not that many people, and we're a digital health company. There's not that many people that have both a health and a tech background. And so we had to understand, hey, does this person have a tech background? Okay, let's go heavier on the tech and a little bit more light on the health in terms of depth and magnitude. Or maybe they have a health background. Let's go a little bit more high level on the tech, more in depth on the health, and all over that spectrum. So that was a really important thing that we did.
Ask as many questions as you can. I think that's really critical. Nobody is an expert in any one thing. Like nobody knows everything there is to know about one thing. And so there's always more things you can be asking or criticizing or trying to figure out. So, ask yourself questions, challenge yourself, try to figure out what you don't know, and then find the answers to what you don't know. I think that's one of the most important things is identifying your own team's weaknesses, your own team's gaps in knowledge, and then, just asking those questions over and over and over until you get an answer. And then the last thing that kind of goes along with that is take any advice that you get with a bit of, I guess, curiosity, and don't just take one person's word as like the truth. As a student, if you're talking to an expert, it might feel like if they tell you something, you might like take that as law, but you'll actually find that, a lot of people, give out advice or have their own experiences that don't necessarily apply to exactly what you're doing. So we kind of have a rule as a team, and we've stuck with this rule not only from the competitions, but to every business decision that we make, is we get at least 3 pieces of advice or 3 answers to the same question before we act on it.
Yeah, I completely agree with all the things that Mackenzie has said. I think those are all really, really great tips. On top of that, I think one advice that I had was, especially for competitions in this virtual setting, is to make sure you hone your virtual pitch and make sure you try to stand out among all the teams that are, pitching virtually. And when we had it in person, we had all different posters and different prototypes, but in a virtual setting, that might be hard, kind of a bit harder to differentiate yourself. So I think what we did, I only competed in one competition that was virtual, which was the EIC in 2020. And what we did as a team was we used a slide deck, and we initially, when all the judges initially joined your breakout room, I guess maybe the structure was similar where everyone kind of joins together and then judges start to trickle in. But as soon as we felt like there was a substantial number of people in there, we kind of just started a slideshow for maybe about 3 to 5 minutes talking about the whole spiel, kind of like a general overview. And after showing that kind of slide deck, we went to this page, this PowerPoint slide that basically highlights all the slides that we had, and then it kind of enumerates them and basically told them that, hey, if you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to jump to any of those slides and we can talk about it. And so I thought that was really effective because we could highlight to them the exact slide while also answering their question. And we kind of segregated the task. We had 4 people in our team at that time. 2 people were kind of answering and managing the slides, and 2 people were managing the chat. So that way, I think most of the judges didn't have to wait to get their questions answered. So that's in terms of standing out in the competition. My second advice would be in terms of highlighting to every member their expectations in the case that you guys win an award. And I think managing that, especially when not everyone will join the project after it finishes, I think is extremely important, because speaking from my personal experience, we ran into a little bit of a rough road towards that, and especially when we work with people that were not as committed into the project. So
the first piece of advice I'd give is that, and this is something that like tons of people will say, is just, you have to just sound super passionate, like overly passionate about what you're talking about, even if that's like a little bit artificial, because like if you don't sound confident about your idea and your company, like no one else is going to believe in it either. And so we really we milked it a little bit sometimes, but most of the time it was coming from like our actual like intrinsic passion. But that's one thing. The other thing is, if I recall, there's like multiple judging feedback rounds. And I remember that for Dempsey, and I'm pretty sure we had that as well for Hollomon. The one really important thing here was we were really like grinded as hard as we could in between those rounds so that we could share improvement. And so in one of the rounds, like we ended up actually getting like our first customers and then in between the rounds, and then we were able to say, hey, like last round we had no customers, now we have these customers. Another time we got like funding from one of Peter Thiel's funds. And another time we like built a COVID screener that screened around 15,000 people in the last like couple weeks. And so showing that improvement and showing like that just the derivative of your work is going up and your progress is going up. That was kind of, I think, a really valuable thing to show the judges. And obviously that was also what we were actually working on, was incorporating their feedback. The last thing I would say is, and this comes from my experience at Dempsey, to add on to what Harrison was saying, because that was virtual also. I would say we actually, and I don't know if this approach is the best, but we actually ended up not going for like a slide deck approach. We had one slide in the background that was just always the same, and it had some information about our company, some information about us, some information about like, our progress, whatever. So that way, regardless of what we were saying, someone could always look back there and see what we were talking about and what we did. And then we also had one of us at all times answering questions in the chat. And so that's kind of how we structured it.
To Nikolas's point, I did want to say really quickly that there are 2 rounds of the HIC, and that you will get feedback back from the judges who look over your 5 to 7 page business summary. And then also to Mackenzie's point, it's sort of up to you about how much of that feedback you want to incorporate and sort of that sort of thing.
I wish we could have done it differently. And if I could do it differently, what I would have done is when we first, because when we brought in new members to the team, we didn't have that conversation as to, what your commitment would be and what part of the prize money would you be able to take home if we were to bring home any, and which part would be dedicated to the project. So I think the most important thing is to outline, for a given level of commitment from a person, what would be the amount that they would be able to take, and having that negotiation.
So we did try to have this conversation beforehand, and we kind of did the simplest thing possible, because we knew that Nanodropper was something that we wanted to grow outside of just the competitions. We saw real market value. And so I guess first, you have to talk to your team and make sure everybody's expectations as far as how far you're planning on taking the project. What is everybody's plans? Because I know some teams enter these competitions as kind of a student experience, but they don't really have intention of creating an actual business. They're thinking, okay, maybe let's work on it for a couple years, but then once we graduate, we're going to go on our own careers. Or our team, it's this is a company that we want to build, and we're all committed. We had already agreed that all of the prize money was going to go directly into the company or directly back into the project. So none of us took home any prize winnings. And we did this we did the UW competitions, but we've done competitions across the whole country. We're still competing up to today. We take advantage of every competition we can, and every single dollar has gone straight back into the company. The only thing where we had to really check expectations is when we were bringing in those MBA students, and we needed to make sure that their expectations aligned with ours, because we really were trying to bring in a student that was going to help us through the competitions. And if we really liked them and their synergies really aligned with our team, then we would totally think about keeping them on the team. But really the initial expectation was that they would work with us through the competition season, and then they would go and do their own thing, that they wouldn't be a permanent member of the team. And so we had that conversation right from the beginning. We made it really clear that every prize dollar would stay with the company. And so I think that communication upfront was really important, and it worked out really well, because both of the MBA students were second-year students, and they already had careers lined up after graduation. So there was no issue there, but we did have that conversation early on.
I'll make this short because I think our experience was super simple with this. It was clear to us from the start that we were going to be working on Spira after Hollomon. And so pretty much we just, when we ended up actually winning, we put that money into our shared Spira bank account, and that's where it sits to this day. So we didn't pocket any of it. And that actually helped a lot, because with all these competitions that we've done, it's allowed us to bootstrap what we can right now. So we don't need to go raise or anything like that and get into the mess of talking with investors. So at least yet. So that's helped a lot.
Really every competition that you go into is just a learning experience, and it's so valuable. I would just strongly encourage you to any idea at all, just go for it, because you'll reap a lot out of it at the end of the day.
It's definitely a good duo, because at HIC, kind of what Mackenzie touched on, at HIC we got to really hone our product, and then at Dempsey we got to hone the business side of things, and that's kind of what consists majority of Spira. And most companies, I would say, or at this stage, I think.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think definitely the chance to meet more people for more and more feedback to continually improve your product or pitch is, I think, very, very valuable. And also the chance to gain more credibility with this project, because if you say you've won this small award in HIC, they know that you're serious about actually getting more for your project, and you're serious about the project. So I think that really doesn't hurt at all. And lastly, just another shot of getting some funding to actually build your thing. I think that was, honestly, to put it bluntly, one of the biggest things.